Okay, well, it is 5 after, and again, I want to respect everybody's time who's on, so we will get started. And again, I want to welcome you all to webinar number 3 in the partnership between Casey Family Programs and NDN Collaborative. The purpose of these webinars has been to provide innovative ideas around how to build systems that can enhance the well-being of your children and families and build communities of hope. So again, I see a number of tribal leaders on the call. I want to welcome you and thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'm Jack. I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Jack Trove from Casey Family Programs. I'm a senior director in the Indian Child Welfare Unit. I know many of you, but not everyone, so sorry about that. But with that, I'm going to turn this over to Michelle Fox from NDN, and I will let her introduce herself and provide some introductory comments to lead into these presentations. Michelle?
Thanks, Jack. Good afternoon, everyone. Michelle Fox. I am the Managing Director for Indian Partners of the NDN Collective. This is part 3 of our webinar series. Now we're kind of getting down into the real issues, right? I mean, we spent our first webinar with the futurists. We did our second webinar kind of tying it all back together. And now we're going into really looking at, innovative projects across Indian country and sharing those with the cohort. A little bit about me. I'm a citizen of the Fort Belknap Indian community. I am calling in today from my house here at Fort Belknap in the middle of nowhere. So if my internet is a little buffered, please give me some grace. I'm doing the best I can with satellite internet. We have 3 really dynamic presenters this morning. Or this afternoon. I'm really excited. They're a good group. They've done some really cool projects across Indian country. Our first panelist is a dear friend of mine as well, Miss Tata Atone. She's a member of the Kiowa Tribe of Oklahoma, and she's not only an attorney, but she's a superstar developer, and I'm just glad to know her. I'll read a little bit of her intro, and then I'll turn it over to her to kind of fill in the gaps. But at a young age, Tata was inspired by the community and human rights advocates like Dr. Martin King and Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall to do meaningful work and drive meaningful change. Motivated by the desire to make a difference in people's lives, Tata's company, Jackrabbit Development, provides sustainable community building, while her nonprofit program, Jackrabbit Homes, works to provide education about clean food, water, and energy, as well as economic development to tribal communities. I'm going to turn it over to you, Tata.
You're on mute, Tata.
I'm so sorry about that. I was having technical difficulties. I wanted to light up my PowerPoint, and then I got clicked into it and couldn't get out. Anyways, thank you so much, Michelle, for the kind introduction. I really appreciate your kind words, and thank you all for being here today. I'm really honored to come and get to present about some of the work that I've been doing. I am Tata Atone, as Michelle mentioned, and am the president of Jackrabbit Development and also the executive director of Jackrabbit Homes. And I started these 2 entities really based off the concept of needing to build off-grid in Indian country. So when I was first started my companies, I was really looking at how you could build in remote areas within Indian country and provide more sustainable living that focused on clean energy, clean water, and clean food. And as I got into the process of designing these homes, we really sort of discovered that what we were doing was designing sustainably and resiliently, not just on the off-grid features. And so we have been working on designing net zero, net positive housing, but also looking at how to build communities that really look at the whole cycle of life. So one of the things that we looked at in society is the fact that there's an isolation, and not just only are we dealing with a pandemic, but an isolation of loneliness, where in our communities, elder people are sent off into their own boxes, and the young are sent off into their own other boxes for childcare. And yet those two costs coupled together for families can be very expensive. And there's science that shows that when you combine the elderly with the youth, what you actually see is a 70% increase in mobility. But what we're also getting is cultural and knowledge exchange, because now you're combining the youth with the elder, and that way they're passing on sort of knowledge. And so we're looking at types of communities that really promote also clean food within them and doing productive landscaping. And that really means like having raspberry bushes. You can't see out my window. I tried to get it perfect, but having raspberry bushes that you can go out and pick in the summer, or things that you can harvest directly out of your gardens, and have that type of clean eating, because these things sort of all impact our entire life, really. The built environment and how we interact with the built environment really impacts our lived experience. So one of the things I put together this morning was some of the projects we've been working on and working with other communities with. And I was just going to try to share my screen and do this slideshow. So hopefully this is going to work well. As I mentioned, I just had technical difficulties a second ago getting stuck into it. But let me see, let me start at the beginning. So this, if I can make this work. Oops, wait, this one back here. This is actually a project done with the Pascoyaki development, and they did this with their new construction company that they've developed using workforce development from a model home that they started. Then they started a construction company and they built these 5-plexes. Now these units were really cool because in their community, they pretty much have HUD housing, and then they have other not HUD housing, which is larger units. But what they didn't have is really sort of single family unit or single person units. So these 5-plexes were designed to have single family or single bedroom, 1-bedroom units on the inside, the 3 units on the inside, and then 2 units on the outside, which each have 2 bedrooms, so that they could provide for, again, that cycle of life. An elderly person who might just need 1 bedroom, or a young person moving out of their homes, out of their parents' homes, who want to stay within the community, but don't really need a full HUD house and can't afford to buy one immediately. But the cool thing about these was they use these insulated concrete blocks, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. And that really helped them achieve not quite net zero because they didn't include their own solar on this. But what it did do is do really high energy efficiency with these composite blocks. And as you can see, they just framed the outside, but then they used wood framing on the inside. And that's something we've been looking at with how to kit homes in a factory and then move them out almost in like a modular house, but more with workforce development on site. Also, we've been sharing this with a lot of tribal communities, bringing in, so some of these members here, this is the Don Cardenas, who is the CEO of their Tribal 17 Corporation, their economic enterprise development, or development enterprise. And then we've got other people from other communities, the Tohono O'odham Nation featured here as well. This is just a little bit more of the view of the houses as they were going up. They went up really quickly, so it took them less than a year. And that was even with a flood that happened. They had a 200-year flood right after they had finished developing all these houses. And so this is sort of the progress of the work going up. And some of the positives that they've seen, or positives of building to net zero, net positive standards, are: one, you can either almost eliminate your utility bills completely outside of the water costs, or in some instances, you can actually see a payback if you're producing more energy than you actually consume. So in one house that we did for Habitat for Humanity, one of the residents came out and said that they were receiving a $40 payback every month from the utility company, where there was net metering going on in their community. As you know, this would also help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so it helps by doing that, because what you're really doing when you're building efficiently and sustainably is that you're reducing the need to heat and cool, because 1/3 to 1/2 of your electricity costs goes to maintaining the climate control within your home. The other benefit to this is storms that we are seeing with climate change. So in many communities, in Texas, they just recently had that cold spell where over 200 people died in their homes, and some of them literally just froze to death. We're also experiencing severe heat in other areas where also people are dying. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that homes, when built with just normal stick frame housing, aren't really providing energy or climatic control with inside. So you're pretty much just bringing in the heat and keeping out the wind and the water, but you transfer the heat and the cold through the walls. And so if you can build those walls to be more sustainable, then what you're really doing is helping to be there's more thermal mass in the walls, which means you're helping to reduce the rate at which the cool comes in or the heat goes out, essentially. So what that can do is to help keep our families safer. And that was really what we kind of discovered, was that we were building homes that could be more of a shelter for a family, because right now people are actually dying in tornadoes and hurricanes. We just saw this collapse of a building in Miami when the maintenance wasn't maintained. And so what we really want to do is help people prevent the loss of life and also the loss of energy, because when a whole house or a whole building collapses like that, what happens is you're losing a lot of net zero or a lot of energy put into the things like appliances. So microwaves, clothes, refrigerators, TVs, all these things that actually are consumption within our earth. And so it helps to reduce that consumption that we're doing currently within our society, by ensuring that buildings can stand through the storms, essentially. Oh, this is a little video.
Hey, so we're standing here at the Pasquayaki development. They used the composite ICF block in order to build these 5 plexes. And we're going to take a moment of silence because we want to note that only that white air conditioner right there on that house is running. Listen to the silence. It is 92 degrees outside. Not a single one of these units is running on these houses.
So we just took that video last week when we were there. It was July 3rd, 92 degrees out, and it was comfortable, but it was pretty hot outside. And there were other air conditionings, as we pointed out, running, but those were on buildings that were built with just normal cinder blocks. And cinder blocks pretty much have no insulation. It's like an R rating of 2. So you're pretty much, again, just keeping out the wind and the water, the dirt, but you're not keeping out the heat and the cold. And that is pretty important when it comes to being comfortable with inside our homes. Let me see if I can, so this is a model home that we're doing over in Redwood Falls near the Lower Sioux community. And this is designed to be a duplex. We may end up reducing or doing it down to just a single unit now, versus doing a duplex for the cost of living and the rate of increases going on in affordable or in materials. But this was designed essentially to be a net zero housing with our productive landscaping. And it is, again, designed so that it's all ADA accessible on the bottom. And we really, again, we're thinking about the cycles of life. And if you have an elderly parent who might be living with you and needing to be mobile within the home, but also at other points, a child might become immobile or might have a disability that needs to have accessibility to one sort of master bedroom. And then we also thought about that because if you are a parent who has a situation, you also sort of still want to have a master bedroom upstairs that you can access. So we wanted to make a home that was large enough for some of our families within our communities and provided them enough space, plus also some storage space. So if you'll look just sort of in the blue on the second floor, you'll see there's like a whole storage space for people to have. There's also a little sitting area by the stairs, but there are 3 bathrooms within this unit as well for the ADA accessibility, but also so that you can have potentially a parent or a child who might need a master bedroom, or if you have parents living with you, as many of us do as they get older, and that way they can stay in the home, because generally what drives elderly individuals out of their homes is the lack of accessibility to their home and becoming immobile. So this is also a project we did over in Antelope Canyon, and it was really cool because we worked with a local entrepreneur who was running a bed and breakfast. And so they were providing a traditional Hogan experience as the Navajo live. But what they were discovering was that it was taking them almost 3.5 to 4 months to build a stick frame Hogan. So we told them about this same product that the Pascagoyaki were using, this composite block. And in one day, literally, we put up the walls and then grouted the walls. And so this was also all off grid with essentially hand tools, buckets and barrels going through. But we managed to get all of those walls stacked as well, using even local residents who came out to see the project and also participate to see how easy it was to work with this particular product, and also in making these more traditional shapes to our community and not so westernized shapes. So from that project last year, we also then came up with this model that we've been working with some communities to try to get funded for actually building. And this is a completely off-grid Hogan that provides most of those modern amenities that people would like to have, such as running water and electricity, as well as a fridge and bathroom and shower. And so this was really designed in response to COVID in having quarantine units. But what we wanted to do was keep a lot of those traditional aspects, such as entry from the east, the storytelling aspects around a wood burning fire, which also provides additional heat source in the winter. But right now what happens is many people rely solely on a wood burning stove. So it's not uncommon to see people's houses that will have, a mound of wood as tall, if not taller, than their Hogan in order to try to survive through the winter. But with a more sustainable, resilient type of building, you would use that more as an ambiance, not necessarily as your sole sense or sole heating source, because this is also designed to be somewhat passive solar. So as you can see, there are these windows along the south part of the Hogan, which allow essentially that your walls and floors will heat up, and then it releases that heat throughout the night, and it has a reduced use of going out through the walls. And then essentially the roof is also designed to be a catchwater roof. So there is a lot of water that falls in a lot of communities right now as we're experiencing more drought. We're not getting as much water, but even at 7 to 8.5 inches of water a year, you can still have a pretty decent source of water if you are using gray water and recycling it. So filtering it multiple times throughout the home, not flushing your toilet with fresh drinkable water, which on average as Americans, we're flushing more than 40 gallons of water a day, each of us, down the toilet. So that's just some of the projects that we've been working on with Jackrabbit Development and with Jackrabbit Homes. The model home is a model project through our nonprofit that we're doing with a joint venture, and trying to present that as a model that could be used in other countries, or other Indian communities to come out and use. But then we are also doing some other work as well through Jackrabbit Development, such as working with the Navajo EPA to design a completely sustainable campus. So they'll really put into practice some of these models of gray water and more energy efficient building. And that will be able to demonstrate to more communities what is possible when we look to the future and building sustainably and resiliently. So thank you so much for the opportunity to come and talk about some of the stuff we're doing. Thank you.
Hey, Tata, I just had one thing. Could you, I don't know if you can do it in 5 minutes, but talk about the sustainable building block and how you integrate that into the builds?
Yeah, I would love to. Definitely. I didn't want to be totally about that, but I would love to talk to you about that. So as you saw in many of
That's her favorite subject.
Exactly. So it's what's getting me excited these days. I've spent a lot of energy focusing on this. And a lot of that was, again, about economic development. So once we got into designing these homes, what we realized was for cost effectiveness, we really needed to vertically integrate our supply chain. And so we needed to control part of the materials going into this. And we came across this opportunity to work with this ICF, the insulated concrete form, the composite block you saw in the Pasquayaki project and the Hogan. And that's essentially recycled styrofoam. It's mixed with concrete and it's ground up, mixed with concrete and molded back into a block. So with the styrofoam, what you really get is insulation with the concrete. Then that block is filled up with concrete and grout in the middle and rebar. So you're getting the strength of a concrete wall, but the insulation of styrofoam. And the best part about our product that we will be using is it's essentially diverted from landfills. So as opposed to people just sending all their styrofoam from packaging over to landfills, which it's roughly estimated to be impacting about 1/3 of America in their landfill, or 1/3 of American landfills are filled with styrofoam alone. We would be using it instead to grind it up, mix it, and then make these building blocks. And so it's a super great product as far as the ease of construction. It doesn't take a lot. Even I have built with these blocks. And so they're super easy to use, but they can also make those cool shapes that aren't necessarily just square around, but we could do octagons and more rounded out shapes. And then we're also working on other product lines that will be more like panels and roofing panels and stuff like that, that will have different lines of this product that can be used in building more sustainably, essentially. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thanks, Tara. So just so the participants know, we'll have about a half hour for Q&A after we're done today. We're going to go ahead and go into the next panelist. It's Mr. Lance Morgan. He's also a KC board member. So it's really cool that we're able to kind of collaborate together with Lance on this. I'll read a little bit about Lance and present his biography. He is the president and CEO of Ho Chunk Inc. He's also a partner at Big Fire Law. And over the last 25 years, he has been instrumental in creating a tribal legal infrastructure and a corporate structure that enabled Ho Chunk Inc. to operate under ultimate tribal authority and control. In 2017, they had revenues upwards of 271 million. And Ho Chunk Inc. is really the superstar of Indian country. And their portfolio is vast. It includes information technology, construction, government contracting, green energy, retail, distribution networking, marketing, media, and transportation. So I'm going to turn it over to Lance. I've admired him from afar for many years, and he's going to tell us a little bit of all the really cool things they've done there at Ho Chunk.
Thanks, no pressure. Last year was a record year for our company. We don't do gaming, although we're about to, because we ran this whole effort to get casinos in Nebraska, and we're building 4 of them at once. We've never built one, but we talked a lot of smack and said it'd be no problem. It's really stressing me out. But Ho Chunk did 308 million last year, non gaming revenue. And we did it from one of the poorest places imaginable. And so from where we started, we're not that poor anymore. I call us best of the poor tribes. That's our claim to fame. And we're pretty innovative in doing that. And one of the things I really like doing, I'm actually passionate about, is the community development side. You know, once you get business going, it's sort of like the shampoo bottle, rinse, wash, repeat or something, right? So it's exciting to build and grow, but it's capitalism. But, we use the money for good. And one of the things we do is housing type stuff in our own community. And we just had the Federal Reserve come to visit us, the Kansas City board. And I did a presentation for them. And I'm going to do that little section on housing. So I think I had somebody send it to me. We're just going to copy it. And let me pull it up here. So, all right. So, can you guys see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So this just, we do sort of a problem and solution kind of thing here. In this one, this is some of the, when the federal government, like a congressman or somebody comes, I said, these are the houses you built for us. Right? I mean, And these were built in the 70s, and it's actually called the Ghetto, but I don't think that's the name. Every area in our reservation has a nickname. And we had a pretty critical housing problem, mostly low income. We have 300 some housing units, very little infrastructure, and there's no valuations on homes because there's really nothing sold there. And so it really creates a lot of issues. We were growing economically, but all our housing was low income based. And so the weird part about our success is that people had to leave the reservation once they started doing better. And you combine that with welfare reform off the reservation, and a lot of people were moving back onto the reservation because it was exempted from it. And the better we got, the poorer we became. And so we had to sort of start figuring it out. But to build a new house, if we're near Sioux City, a new house might be 200,000, but on the reservation it only values at 50,000. And so you can't. They cost exactly the same, but so building new houses with the mortgage system became almost an impossibility, and unless you could change the valuation issues. We had lots of employees, we had lots of people who were sort of mortgage eligible. One of the things that really pissed me off, to be totally honest, was everybody had bad credit. So you'll see that we built these towns, but everybody had bad credit. It was primarily low income. It was because they didn't have banking relationships. And so we bought an interest in a bank in Sioux City. And then we bought the Native American Bank. And then I pretty much made everybody sign up for the 401k program. I would give them a raise for the amount that they put into it. And I did not give them their normal raise. Otherwise, they wouldn't get it. And so I went around to every Native American. If you were not necessarily a tribal member, I wasn't doing that for you, to be totally honest. But I was hooking everybody up to get into and start thinking long term. And we now own, I guess, 30-some% of the Native American Bank too. They were sort of on their deathbed when we invested money into them, and now they're doing really, really well. We also started a down payment assistance program. The tribe had one that was low income oriented. You could get $5,000 if you were low income, but that's really not what we were targeting. We started raising money, then we fought a gas tax battle, and we used that money for it. And we went from $3,000, and it wasn't income oriented, just had to be a tribal member to build a house. Then it went to $5,000, and then immediately went to $15,000. And then I asked the tribe if they would let us take $1 million of Ho-Chunk Inc.'s dividend, and the next 20 people got $50,000 for a down payment assistance. And somebody said, well, what about that 15? I said, throw it on top, right? And so now you can get 65,000. Just last week, the tribe upped it by $20,000. So you can get 85,000 now for up to 85,000. Sometimes it's a little less. If you're low income and the house is a little bit cheaper to build, we can tap into federal funds to supplement it, so we don't drain the tribe's money completely. But what's happening is it's turning out to be about 30% of the cost of the home. But it's not a freebie. You have to get the mortgage for the rest of it. We don't have to build the entire cost structure. The banking system is paying in the rest. And since we're hooking people up on car loans, they can now get a bank loan. We also developed our own town while we were at it. There's a little picture of it in the back, a small picture of it. You'll see a better picture shortly. This data goes back to 2016. It's a little bit out of date, but we started increasing home ownership. The house values have skyrocketed. Right now, our valuations on homes are coming in exactly at what they would be in Sioux City, our nearby city. So you don't have to do gigantic down payments anymore to get it to deal with the rural valuation issue. But it doesn't matter. We're still doing it because we're a sort of a corporate entity with a heart. What we've done is, if you look at one of these houses that we built, you get a free lot because we found federal funding for that. A free lot, sometimes it's $2,000 or something. We build the house at cost. We own the housing construction company, and we have a modular home company. So we don't really mess around. We get you the loan because we have the bank, and we'll give you the job to pay for the mortgage on top of it. We don't make any profit. You get the down payment assistance, the lot's free. So we built the exact same house in Sioux City versus Winnebago. And in Sioux City, it was $248,000. In Winnebago, it was $148,000. So it's about $100,000 in benefits to tribal members. And $148,000 sounds like a lot, but it's lower. The mortgage itself is lower than rent in Sioux City. We also build a lot of rental income housing, and we use our dividends to sort of, the tribe lets us keep a portion of it, and we use that to offset the capital costs. So we're about $200 to $400 below market for our rental houses. So here's a picture of, the first thing we did was there was no place to build houses. So we started building our own little town, and it's called the Ho Chunk Village. And it's 40 acres. And you can see, if you look, there's a main street here, and then there's a farmer's market, and behind it is, and there's apartments above these Main Street buildings. And this building I'm pointing at right now, we were cheap. We didn't want to pay another architect. So we built another one, just turned it sideways. And my law firm is now in there. There's apartments above it. Over here is a warehouse. And if you look closely, it's covered in solar panels. We have thousands of solar panels in our community. This farmer's market is designed to sort of kickstart the entrepreneurial sector and get healthy activities going. We actually raised triple the amount of money we needed for it. And so we were able to do a lot of other things with it in terms of developing our agricultural stuff. You can see some modern townhouses back here where I'm pointing to them. And those came in 4 pieces from our factory. These are home ownership in the back. These are more apartments. And we have elder housing and mortgages. I mean, it really is quite the deal. And we still have a lot of people on the waiting list, but we bought the 40 acres to the north of it, and we've got a little bit of the infrastructure in place. We're going to use COVID money to put in the rest, and we're developing. I put it on my Facebook, the elder housing units. We're going to build their first 12 of them, and they're just going to be awesome. And the tribe allocated some money for the infrastructure. These units I'm pointing at that are sort of multicolored back here, that's going to be an elders village where everybody shares like a park space, and they'll have their own units. I think they're going to be duplexes actually. They'll all be handicap accessible. They'll have porches. They'll be able to interact. I mean, I think it's going to be remarkable. We actually have won 3 design awards for some reason. Apparently, there's not much cool design going on in Nebraska in the Midwest. So we've got 3 of the awards, which is really weird. One of the things that we've done, we've talked the tribe. We give the tribe 25% of our profits, and they've allowed us to keep 30% of it over the last 6 years of that. And in order to build housing, and I had to promise to build 100 housing units and the infrastructure for another 100 in 5 years. We built 104. But the amount of money we make isn't significant enough to build that. So we had to leverage those dollars. We did it with low income tax credits, new markets tax credits, grants, loans, and then if mortgages took up the rest of the money. So I'll give you an example. A mortgage puts up 30%, the bank puts up the 70. We wanted to build those apartment buildings in that farmer's market. We got a new market tax credit for 20% of the money. We got some additional grants. We got about 50% of the money. Our bank then loaned the rest of the money into the system. And then we put a little bit of our own capital in from the retained dividend. Since we got so much free money, we've been able to lower the rents to be well below market for our tribal members. And we're not looking just for low income housing only. If you go back a little bit, so this, you can't quite see it by this tree. That's a low income housing apartment that was paid for with tax credits. This one is too. And, but these are subsidized market rate housing. These are subsidized market rate. These are elder housing units here. I think those are like a few $100 a month. And then there's apartments above here that are all sort of nice, but below market. And our goal was to create housing. If you're an elder, you got a house. There's a type of house. If you're a young professional, there's a type of house. If you're a poor single mother, we got a place for you. If you're a family and you got your act together and you can get a mortgage, well, you can move into one of these back here and have your own home. And what's interesting is none of this is in trust. We have a housing development in trust, a low income development on the south end of town, but this is all subject to property tax. And what's interesting is everybody who's paid off their home could put it into trust, but nobody has chosen to do that. My property taxes are pretty minimal there. I live in the neighborhood. It's $1,800 a year, but I kind of like owning it instead of having it in trust. In a trust, your only real economic value is what you can rent it for. I have a credit line on it, so I can use it to do other things. And so what you're seeing, and by the way, our down payment assistance is a 5-year forgivable loan. And so you can't just flip it. But what you're seeing is that people have instant wealth creation. And what natives don't really have a lot of is wealth and assets to tap into. And so this is a wealth creator. You throw that in with the 401k and the good jobs. We have more jobs than people in our community. And so if you don't have a job, you have a major commitment to unemployment. And I mean, we have people that do that, but the community itself is absolutely booming. And we're not a casino tribe. Our casino lost money last year. You know, we're about to become one if we build these casinos. But you can see we're putting lots of thought and effort into the design of itself. And we're trying to find ways to leverage up the money. We've raised about $20 million from the money that we've put into this. COVID has actually infused more money into the community. The elder housing units that I referred to, the 12, are being paid for with ARPA funds that are coming out because I think that there was some talk about multi-generational housing. That's a big issue. But in our community, we have a rule that the elders can't live with anybody, and they love it because grandma can't say no to their drug addicted grandson. And so they say they're helping grandma, but sometimes they're abusing them in some way. And so a lot of grandparents are moving out of their home and they move into these elder units, and we have a rule that no one else can live there but the elders, and they love it. I mean, they tell on themselves, and so it gives them a way to say no and to have some peace. They don't have to do that. They don't have to live there. They can stay in multi-generational housing. And we have some houses that are multi-generational oriented. But in this instance, these units are not multi-generational. They're just elders only. And so it's a slightly different approach than I think we were talking about earlier. In order to do this, we have to get everybody in the community involved. We have the tribe, you know, they say yes to grants. They let us keep some of the money. There's a village board who accesses the water. Indian Health Services provides some money for the water, the hookups. Ho-Chunk does the planning, designing. The tribal housing gives us lot for the low-income housing development. Ho-Chunk Inc. itself owns the Ho-Chunk Village. The roads department they'll dig the basements, they'll build the roads for us. We started our own nonprofit called the Ho-Chunk Community Development Fund. That acts as the linkage entity for all of these entities. We give them $150,000 a year, and we have since 2000. And they've raised in taxes and grants about 78 million for us. So we've put about 2.5 million in, because we only gave them 100,000 in the beginning, and they've kicked out, you know, I don't know, 40 times that amount. And so and they sort of do what we ask and then do all these other things in the community to make stuff happen. And so we've created an ecosystem and a network where all these entities can function together. Ho-Chunk itself is sort of the money and a little bit of the organizational structure behind it. But all of these other entities, we've gotten to the point where you have an idea and there's a way just to get it done. And if you want to buy a home, and these are pictures of tribal members who've got their own home. If you want to buy a home, we do a home buyer's education class. We have the down payment assistance fund, which we talked about. We've also won the Harvard Honoring Nation Award for the Community Development Fund, which provide 50% match to any good idea. I almost went to jail because I wanted a non-race-based gasoline tax. And we use the money to go into this fund, and it provides a 50% match for any good idea in our town. Whether it's community development, community beautification, or endowment funds. And we've used it about 40 some times. And so we have these mechanisms for people who have grassroots types idea of making stuff happen. The tax credits is a big part of it. We leverage all the existing assets, and we make sure everybody has access to credit. We either loan them the money ourselves. We actually build the houses for them. They don't have to get a loan for construction. And then they try to close on it. Sometimes it takes a long time. But every house we've built, we've sold, and it's been not really been a problem. Let's see. We've helped about 70 people get into a new home. This just goes into stuff I've already talked about. We use our gas tax, we use Ho-Chunk's dividend, and that's what provides most of the money for some of these down payment assistance. It's now 85,000. Here's this view's a little bit out of date. That's a view from the Ho-Chunk Village from the other side. And you can see this is the Main Street area here. Here's a little bit of light industrial. There's some of the low-income apartments. This is the new building that this is the one we had, then we flipped it sideways. And there's 7 apartments above it and offices below. Here there's offices below. There's a coffee shop. There's a dollar store. There's a restaurant. Here's one of our corporate offices here at Ho-Chunk. We're filling in this. This is our nonprofit. We are building an office building right here for Ho-Chunk Inc. because we're growing so fast. These are townhouses, there's more apartments, elder housing, rental, and then these are all home ownership mortgages. This area will be mortgages. This will be light industrial. We've just got the funding to finish the rest of the 40 acres. And at the far end, we're putting the elders housing again. I'm a little worried about that. We had elders housing on a hill, and the hill was sort of a barrier. So our elders housing we have on this area is on a flat portion, and they can walk to the store, they can walk to the restaurant, they can walk to the coffee shop, they can walk to the farmer's market. I want to show you one more thing, since this goes back, to show you how the mechanism works. We built this farmer's market. The nonprofit helped fund gardeners. They helped fund entrepreneurs with the CDFI program. Those gardeners sell their products. The hospital is kicking in here. The tribal college has an extension office in the farmers market building. Ho Chunk Inc. funds the tribal farm. We do organic poultry. We needed poultry because we needed chicken manure in order for our organic farm. The farm sells some products here. We have the educational element here. Our traditional Indian corn was the only people making it were nuns at the Catholic school. And if your workforce is a nun-oriented workforce, you're not going to be there for much longer. And so we kicked up the entire thing. It was embarrassing because we were running out of our traditional corn at powwow, and they were mad because the nuns didn't work hard enough to make enough, and it's all very hand driven. But if you look, you can see what we're doing here. Look at this. The young kids are all part of it. We're bringing it back. And so you really can see what's happening with what we're doing on some of these other issues. We didn't farm at all. We now farm 6,000 acres. If you look in the corner here, we got a cool logo. All right, that's all I knew about farming. But you can see what's changing. Anyway, that's my presentation and on housing. But I wanted to throw in a little bit about how that ecosystem that we built for housing can also work in other areas, like with the farming and the entrepreneur development and healthy eating.
Thank you so much, Lance. I mean, I'm always just so impressed with how you guys work through your internal ecosystem. So thank you so much. Next presenter is Sunny Redbear. She's a colleague of mine. She is the Director of Racial Equity here at the NDN Collective. And Sunny's going to talk to us a little bit about an innovative project that they worked on last year in response to homelessness in Rapid City. Camp Miniluzahon was established by Creek Patrol volunteers in Rapid City to provide care and protection for our unsheltered relatives along Miniluzahon, which is Rapid Creek, this past winter and for years to come. The vision is to create a tiny home community for our unsheltered relatives on the land where Camp Miniluzahon resides. So Honey is here to talk to us a little bit about her experience working with our unsheltered relatives over the winter in Rapid City, and our long-term visioning, building a tiny home community on Camp Miniluzahon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so inspired by both Lance and Tata, like all the work that you've been doing. Super inspiring, especially because right now we're in the planning phases for this tiny home community. So everything that you talked about, just kind of like jotted all these notes down over here. But for us, we are definitely a part of the grassroots part. It's a grassroots movement, a grassroots project that Lance was kind of talking about, giving that space for those people, and that would be us. Creek Patrol is what started the idea of this tiny home community. And Creek Patrol is basically a group of volunteers from our community who are willing to walk a 4.5 to 5 mile route along Rapid Creek every night. So they start this route every night around 5:30. Now it's a little later because the sun goes down later here in the summer, but they walk the creek and they give essentials out to the relatives, whether it's blankets or food or water, tarps, whatever that may be. We have a tent band here. So a lot of them are trying to find ways to create a shelter for themselves. And here in Rapid City, our unhoused population is climbing well past 400 people within this small city. So Creek Patrol really showed us the gaps in service for our Indigenous people here in the Black Hills. And also the winter was coming. So we also knew that the life-threatening weather was going to be another battle that we would face, in which a lot of our unhoused relatives don't make it through the winter. There's usually a large number of people that are exposed to the life-threatening cold weather and don't make it. So with that in mind, we had a nonviolent direct action here in Rapid City to bring awareness to these gaps in service, and also to bring visibility to our unhoused relatives. And so with that, it created the momentum to build out what we called Camp Miniluzaha. And Creek Patrol came together with NDN Collective, and we decided, well, we'd like to build a camp to be able to house our houseless relatives. What's that going to look like? Literally, we need this housing yesterday. And so what we did is we actually found a piece of trust land that's tribally owned by the Oglala Sioux tribe, Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, and the Rosebud Sioux tribe. And this land, there's about 116 acres, I want to say 116 or 117 acres of tribal sovereign land in the middle of Rapid City, which not many people knew about. We were able to get permission from all three tribes to be able to build a camp. And we did not have running water. We did not have electricity. Our only heat source was wood stoves, but we ended up making it work. It was an amazing experience. I'll go ahead and share my screen here briefly so that I can kind of put some pictures to what I'm describing here.
Put a casino on that, Sonny.
I think that's one of the ideas from one of the tribes, but yeah, I don't want to talk about that one too much, though they might actually go for it. Okay. So Camp Miniluzaha actually started, we only started with 4 teepees, and we put the teepees up when we started serving food, and the relatives came. So it's kind of like you build it and they will come. And what's that? Oh, is someone just unmute? Are you able to hear me, Michelle?
Yeah, I can hear you, Sonny. I think we were able to mute him.
Okay, right on. So Camp Miniluzaha started with only 4 teepees, and it was fine throughout October, right? This was in October of this last year, but we realized very quickly that the colder weather was coming, and they don't make teepees like we used to. They're made out of canvas. And so we were trying to be innovative, right? We were like, what can we do to prepare for this harsh winter? So we ended up ordering in insulated army tents from Montana, and we built 2-inch insulated platforms for these tents. Each tent we were able to house anywhere from 25 to 30 people per tent, and our heat source was actually wood stoves. It turned into this amazing. It was an amazing experience to watch how grassroots movements, how if you just go and do it, what can come of that. Here is just a picture of us gathering and having a meeting about what do we do? All of us, we're walking in the cold, checking on relatives at the creek. And we're just we need a solution. What can we do? And literally it was the very next day that we went up to this land and we put up the first teepee. Not knowing much of what was coming next, of the vision for the future or anything, but just kind of in the now. So this was our first fire, our first sacred fire. We prayed around this fire, we put tobacco down, made our offerings, really asked for guidance and strength for the upcoming harsh winter. So these are the 4 teepees that we started with, and we basically just started bringing relatives up from downtown. So from this point all the way to the middle of downtown was about 6 miles, into Rapid. So it was quite the journey. And here is our crew really trying to figure out before the winter hits, like, what are we going to do next? And this is when we decided to bring in the tents and build the platforms, and our community came and showed up and volunteered. This is a tent that we would be able to house anywhere from 25 to 30. We had cots and sleeping bags. And we had each tent divided into women's and men, and also the LGBTQIA plus community as well, keeping them in mind and making sure that they were safe. Here's one of our relatives. The tents behind him held many donations that we would go through every day. And of course, it's not without setbacks. We did a lot of learning in this process of safety, of how to create a safe space for our relatives. But we also learned that with each setback, it gave us an opportunity to rebuild. And so within an hour and a half, we were able to clean up that entire area and start building. And we decided to build it differently. So we, instead of doing smaller tents, we ended up doing the larger tents. And it was just a really beautiful place to be. What we learned in this process is that many times city services or services are created with many hoops, with many barriers for our people that they have to jump through. They don't have access to transportation. Many of them are veterans on disability. A lot of people that are just like in the cycle of being unhoused. And we learned through creating this community, creating this family, that if you give people the safe space to be able to govern themselves and to step into their own Indigenous power, that really beautiful things can happen. This was on our Thanksgiving, and we also had a projector, so we'd play movies all the time, gave them a sense of normalcy. Everyone would kind of play card games and sit around and have coffee and watch movies. A lot of this functioned off of mutual aid throughout the community. We served over 500 meals throughout this time, and a lot of those were home cooked meals from just our community chipping in to help. And this is kind of like what our tents looked like inside to give you a better idea. We also had the spiritual side of it. We had sweat and Ipi every other night. And then throughout this process too, we were able to save lives. We were pulling people from the creek during the winter, many of which would have died. A lot of people experience harassment, violent attacks, and many of us would be on the creek when those things were happening. So we were able to prevent those things. And really get to know, like even now, we have a relative that's missing and we know him very well. So everybody, like we all realize, like we haven't seen him in a day or two, like we need to start looking for him, and be able to grow those relationships with our community and with our houseless relatives is super important in moving forward with building a community that works together in all aspects. Here, of course, our heat source was wood stove. So a lot of the unhoused would help us. Everyone would kind of like pitch in to make sure that everything was functioning at camp, which is really awesome because it gave them a sense of like purpose and kept them busy. And it was really awesome to see like the organic cycle that was created of like sobriety, when somebody would find purpose and they would get to work, and then pretty soon they would start holding other relatives accountable and they would become sober as well. And by the end of camp, we had dozens of relatives that were sober and that they called camp home. This is one of our cook shack when we first were setting it up with our donations, also exercising our sovereignty on our sovereign land. It was really awesome. During this experience, it was really cool to see. When I say that we were able to govern ourselves, I mean that wholly. Like no Rapid City Police Department, no one was able to come onto our land. And we are actually able to de-escalate and take control of situations, whether they were fights or disagreements, different things that would happen within this camp. We were actually able to handle it on our own without having to call the police or having to put people in jail. And it was like a really cool experience to be able to realize the power that we have as individuals and as Indigenous people, being able to govern ourselves. This is an example of our creek patrol. This is the creek patrol. We continue to gather people and volunteers within our community to continue to walk the creek. We did have COVID testing at camp. At one point, camp was the safest place in South Dakota with COVID. We did have a tent donated to us by the Oglala Sioux tribe, which was amazing. It came with a huge generator that could generate enough electricity for a tiny village. Very, very helpful. This is kind of an overview of what camp looked like. And then we also had the vans too that you see there. We had two 15-passenger vans that we would bring the relatives from downtown up to camp. I'm just gonna scroll through a couple of these.
Sunny, I just
And
had a
then-
couple like questions, which may be helpful. Is how many people do you guys think you served at the camp? And the other one, and you may not know this, is how many lives do you think you saved?
Wow, that is a hard question. I know that since camp has closed, that 6 people have passed within the last 2 months. And that's just heat exhaustion, being out in the elements, different things like that. Yeah. And your first question was?
How many people do you think you served over the length of?
Right. So I do have a fact sheet here for everybody. We served we served over 350 relatives. We would serve anywhere from 50 to 90 relatives every night in our tents. And what that meant is that we would do transportation from town multiple times a day. We would cover a minimum of 60 miles per van every single day. And so that was kind of like a big part of it, is like, that's one of the gaps in services here in Rapid City is transportation. I mean, it is everywhere, right? But yeah, we were able to house 50 to 90 relatives per night. We were also able to provide security at camp and downtown along the creek. We are also able to provide warming items. We had medic support. We also had talking circles and cultural teachings. Let's see here. And this was for any person. It wasn't just Indigenous people. This was for everybody in our community that was unhoused. So, but we did have a lot of different tribes that were represented at camp, including OST, all the way from Lower Brule. We had the Navajo, Dene, and Sitin Yankton. And many of them, the range of age was like 18 to 64. We had a lot of relatives there. We are also able to get people into like transitional housing, which was really cool. Yeah, so this was kind of our project this last summer. We were busy working probably 16 hours a day. But our future going forward, like our vision for the future, is to create a tiny home community for our relatives. And our goal is to mirror what we learned at camp and put it into this tiny home community, really focusing on self-determination, on self-governance, and giving people a safe space to be able to grow. And I think like the best way that I could describe it is that many of the city services were like, this is the way we need you to go. Like, these are the hoops that you need to go through. And with camp, it was like, we're going to create this space for you to make your own decisions, what you feel like is best for your life. And we're here to support you, which I think is like the stance of an advocate. And people were able to like make their own decisions. And then the trust in themselves grew to be able to know what they even wanted for the future. So our Our vision is to create a tiny home community with wraparound services. We're talking about, you know, a sweat lodge. We're talking about workforce development. We're also talking about, you know, home equity. So I'm going to skip over down to here, and bear with me. I am not an architect, or I can't draw either. So, but this is something that we have created in order to show how we want to replicate camp with our tiny home community. And what we have here is that in the middle, we're going to have our wet house where people can come intoxicated. We're going to have a men's side and a women's side here. And then also how we're deciding to use the tiny homes is that the first row of tiny homes is going to be for those that are stepping into their sobriety, those that have been sober for 3 to 6 months, giving them a space to really start trusting themselves. And as you move outward in the rows, like the second row, the red row is going to be for those that have been sober for 6 months to a year, and the yellow are from like a year on, or maybe they've always been sober. But the final row of tiny homes is going to be for those that those homes can be owned. So we're going to talk about home ownership and building equity for our unhoused, and you can hitch it up and haul it away if you desire in the end. And so that's when our workforce development is going to be coming in for our unhoused to be able to train them to be able to build these tiny homes for us as well. So, so yeah, I think that we're in the very beginning phases. We're just doing the big planning for how this is going to be laid out. You know, what type of houses we're going to be building. Of course, we want to be like culturally appropriate housing with culturally sustainable infrastructure and architecture and all that stuff. So, you know, as you two were talking earlier, I was just taking notes because we're in that phase, right? But we have all this information that we've collected over the year of dealing with and learning from our unhoused of like how we're wanting to move forward with their input, with being inclusive in what they're really desiring for their future. So I think that I'm just really excited for it and excited to continue to learn along the way. So yeah, but if anyone has any questions, I think that's coming up. Definitely let me know. But thank you for sharing this space with me and giving me your time.
Thank you so much, Sunny. So before I turn it over to Q&A, and I'll kind of moderate the Q&A, I just wanted to give the participants a little bit of the reasoning as to why we structured this session the way we did. One, I definitely wanted to have the tribal perspective from Lance being a tribal CEO and really from what a tribal centric approach, right? I wanted to bring in Tata as an Indigenous entrepreneur, not only to help put in a plug for her amazing building product, but just some of the really cool innovative projects that she's worked on. And then really I wanted to bring in Sunny to talk about difficult things like homelessness and our unhoused relatives. You know, all tribes have these challenges. And so I really hope that you enjoyed this session. Please ask lots of questions because we have the next 20 minutes. I think the easiest way to do it is we'll just do popcorn style. If you feel like you're not getting your question answered or you can't get in there, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll make sure that it gets answered as well. Lance, there was a question from Councilwoman Fayant from Thalish Kootenai as to if you guys were a Section 17 corporation.
No, we're Ho-Chunk Inc. is a tribal corporation under tribal law. You guys are a Section 17 corporation, but you have subsidiary structures. I helped set that up back in the day because you guys just had you would just form normal corporations, but you went to a holding company structure some years ago, which creates more efficiency. But if you're a Section 17 and you want to be a holding company, you got to have subsidiaries, and so you need some sort of corporate structure under that for the subsidiaries. Usually tribes do LLCs now. We're sort of the inventors of the modern holding company LLC structure, which is so uncool, it's hard to even say. But what we actually shared with you guys at the time, sort of some of the structural elements of the holding company, and you guys helped us get into government contracting. So thank you for that. No one remembers that, but it's 15 years ago, but it's very appreciative. But I think that from our standpoint, having it all under tribal law is more powerful. And there's a technical reason to be an LLC more than tribal corporation. But I think it's a little bit safer from a tax standpoint to be under a Section 17. But my theory is if the government gives it, they can take it away. And so I've shied away from that myself. But it's a perfectly acceptable way to go. My last 10 legal clients have formed tribal holding companies under tribal law using LLC structures. And if they have a Section 17, they use LLCs as the subsidiary component, if that helps. I'm curious how Sunny is going to get the funding. Indian Collective does a good job of raising money. Congratulations on that. How are you going to get the funding for the tiny houses? And have you thought about using some insulated blocks?
Or letting us design them?
Yes, no, I'm in. Yeah, no, I believe our advancement team is phenomenal. And so we've been raising money, and I do believe we've already raised the money to continue with the planning. So so yeah, I don't know all the ins and outs, and I don't know, Michelle, if you want to share more on that.
So we are entering into likely what's going to be a 2 to 3 year planning phase for the tiny home project, but also additional development corridor planning in Rapid City. So the first phase, I think it's about 300K in planning. I know they've raised that. I've asked that question too. I was like, how are we going to pay for these? So I think we're thinking of a few different things, some creative financing, and also just raising money.
I have another question. We have a homeless shelter for men, and it's gone from homeless shelter to their home, right? So how is it that, how do you deal with that? Because I said nobody moves out of a shelter if they can help it, because they've got a situation. And so how do you not convert that into long-term living? And how do you deal with that issue?
I think it's gonna be a process of figuring out, how that looks. I think we're exploring something that's never really been done here in the area, especially just even for myself. But we're hoping that with the wraparound services that are provided through partnerships, that we'll be able to start a journey of healing for our people in order to step into new phases of their lives. One of the things I'm the director of racial equity for NDN Collective, and one of the things that we emphasize a lot is that, NDN Collective is not in social services. That's not our job, but our job is to create a space for people to step into their power, into self-determination. And we're really hoping to be able to have services such as counseling, as somatic healing, to really address the root causes of why they're unhoused in the first place. And a lot of that too with our racial equity campaign is addressing those injustices and the barriers in which our people face within our own city. So that with our campaign, what we're focusing on are 3 different things. We're working on programs, projects, and policies. And a lot of our programs are being created through our projects, such as CAMP, right? So through CAMP, we've learned all the programs that are needed to create an environment for our unhoused and where they can flourish and thrive. And then our policy part.
Is there a time limit on people living there?
So that's another part of the programming that we'll be figuring out as well. So what I'm hoping is that this is a continual. We're wanting people to start on that first row of housing, right, where they're just getting into sobriety or in finding that support. And as they grow out, I mean, this is going to be a year, 2 years process, right? Until they can step into the process or the cycle of like home ownership. And so these are all new. These are all new ideas. These are all things that we're exploring. And then also working with our planning team on like what is really actually is going to work for us. So we're hoping to continue that cycle of people coming and going and then owning their own homes in order for them to take them with them. So.
I think you're muted, Michelle.
Sorry about that. Sunny, we have another question in the chat. It is from Jody Perez from the SNK Housing Authority. Were all the helpers volunteers? You mentioned wraparound services for the tiny homes. How will they be provided?
So in the beginning phases of camp and Creek Patrol, they were all volunteers. And what happened was with Creek Patrol, they applied for a grant through NDN Collective and were able to get the self-determination grant, which was $100,000. And so Camp Mini Luzaha actually ran off of $100,000 for 7.5 months. And so through that grant, we were able to start paying the volunteers that were consistent and that were there every single day. And so we were able to kind of like give them a little something in order for all the work that they've been doing. But right now, Creek Patrol is still going on. It's still happening, and it is volunteers from just the community. And then the wraparound services, what we're doing right now through our campaign is creating partnerships within our community in order to see what services are going to be best. We've talked about many counseling services, workforce development, having outreach workers is part of that as well. So we're still exploring that and building those out and building out the partnerships of who we feel would be good in these spaces.
Sunny, there's another question regarding transportation at the camp. This is from Anita Matt from SNK as well. The question is, you mentioned transportation in vans daily. Do the residents have to stay at camp or on site?
So the residents do not have to stay. We often say you can come or you can go. It was a wet camp, meaning that you could come there intoxicated. But we did set up camp in order to accommodate those that were sober. And so, yeah, residents could come and go as they pleased. A lot of them have daily errands they need to run. They need to check their mail. They need doctor's appointments. They need to go pick up medication or check on family members. And so many times we would have transportation throughout the day. We would have morning transportation, which we would take everybody down at night. There were different feeds around town. So a lot of them would want to make sure and go to certain feeds and then check their mail and do all the things that they needed to do. And then we would have transportation at noon for anybody else at camp or people that wanted to come up to camp. And then we would have transportation in the evening. And our evening transportation was like the one that was the busiest. We would bring at least 40 people up per night during that time. And then there were people that literally would stay at camp all the time because they knew that if they left camp that they would break their sobriety. And so they felt camp was like the safe space that they could just hang out, maybe chop some wood, help clean up the tents, help cook food, whatever it was that was needed during the day. A lot of people would like stay around and want to stay there because they were on the land. They were out. It was beautiful there. You know, it was surrounded by trees. And so being on the land was a huge part of why camp was successful. So.
I have a couple of questions just to kind of facilitate dialogue as well. Lance, do you guys have any statistics on what is the average mortgage payment for the tribal member owned houses?
We don't have any statistics, but I think that I just know anecdotally some of them. On the low income houses, which we didn't show, they're on the other end of town, they're a little bit smaller. The first mortgage was $629. And that was on trust land. And I know one of the higher ones I know is around $1,100, but you're talking about houses that are like 200 and some $1,000 plus. I mean, I didn't show you any of the houses, but they're sort of on the spectacular side for the res. When people visit us from other tribes, they're like, what the heck's going on here? Because it's bizarre. But the most that I know of is around 1,400, and that's probably with about $250 to $300 a month in taxes on those homes. But those are people with pretty good jobs, usually 2-income families, and the fact that they're getting a $250,000 home for $150,000 usually has some appeal to them. And so we're getting lots and lots of families there. But what's interesting is the first time we did a house 10 years ago, it was around 110,000. The last one we sold was 225. And there's enough wealth here and success that people are willing to do that. And if you live on the reservation, if you have a $100,000 income, you don't have to pay 6.5% income tax. So people have made the decision that if they can avoid property taxes in some instances and avoid the income tax on some of their higher income people, it's pretty well. I have about 400 people making over 100,000 a year working for me. We have about 1,800 employees. So, I mean, there's a lot of people doing good, right? And so they're looking for, I think they watch HGTV and they want a nice walk-in closet and a fancy kitchen. What's interesting about our house is the first one we built, I said, what kind of cabinets do you want? And they said, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, why not? You want white? You want maple? You want something? They said, don't we just have to take oak, or whatever the lowest one is? And so getting people to even pick out stuff and figure out how they want things to look was a real challenge in the beginning. And now everybody, has very high-end standards and tastes and wants a 3-car garage. And it's just getting crazy around here. The loft above the garage. I mean, it's bizarre what's happening. And so people can afford to do what they want in this environment. And we do it at cost. So, and it's on the reservation. So there's some savings associated with it. And so they're really going all out. I mean, it's weird. And it creates some dichotomy in our community with low income, sort of the haves and the have-nots. It's causing a little bit of a social problem, but they would just leave if there wasn't that possibility. And what's happening is the people who are the emerging middle class are creating higher standards at the school. They're creating higher standards in the community. And so, I mean, it really is lifting everybody, and figuring out ways to bake that bigger cake so that other people can benefit from it is still a challenge. But I mean, that's a long answer, I guess. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that. One other question I had is, can you give us an example? I know you talked about one instance in the presentation, but about how you were able to leverage both. And when I say private funding, I'm calling tribal funding or other sources private funding, but would you be able to give us an example of an instance of how you leverage both federal funding and private funding to make some of these projects
Sure.
happen?
So we built these really nice townhouses. I mean, they're ridiculous. It's super modern, cool. And there's there are 4 plexes. There's 2 floors, and then there's the basement we elevated kind of like a walkout, like a brownstone, and put a floor beneath it. So there's 4 apartments within that. And we built several of them, and we combined them with an office building, an apartment building that we're building, and the farmer's market. We had to get to a certain scale. And once we did that, we got enough, it was a big enough project that we could tap into new market tax credits. And that is a federal program that provides about 20% of the matching dollars. And then we got a grant for the farmer's market that put in some federal grant money that put in some additional money. And then we used, on a per unit basis, we allocated for the small ones, 25,000, but for the large units, 50,000. And so we used some of Ho Chunk's dividend, which comes from the tribe. We used another 500 and some thousand of it to lower the capital cost on the project. So the tax credits kicked in about 600,000 to 700,000 total. No, maybe about $1 million, because we added it was about 20%, about $1 million. We got 600,000 from the dividend fund, and we got another 600,000 from the grant project. And so the total project itself was about $5 million. And let's see, that adds up to about $2.5 million, I suppose, of free money into the mix. And then we borrowed the rest through a loan, through our bank, actually. And And then we have a small enough mortgage, and that building is part apartment, part offices, that the rents on the office portion alone just covers the loan payment. And so we don't really have any debt service coverage on the apartments themselves. And so we can drop the apartments. The exact same apartments we have in Sioux City are $1,200 a month. And the most expensive with garages are $800, and most of them, and then they're the lower ones of the unit ones I'm talking about are $500 or $600. But they are super modern, ultra cool places, and that allows us to be about $400 below the market for these compared to Sioux City. And some people say they're high, but if you're low income, they're high. But if you're working at the hospital, or for us, and then you don't have to pay state income tax on top of it, and you can live in your own community in a high quality home. I mean, we have a list of people for these places, and so we don't have to be low income or oriented only. But we do have low income housing that we build also, but we do the balance of it. But that's an example of how we approach things. We use every tool in the toolkit, and we're used to doing it because they're our nonprofit. They do what we ask generally. And the tribe is very supportive, and we have corporate capital, and we have construction company and housing company. And the bank. So we have all the pieces at our disposal. And so it allows us to play any game we choose to play. So we are limited by our imagination and really trying to make it a sustainable business.
Lance, we have another question in the chat. This is from Jody Perez from S&K Housing Authority. Did you use any NAHASDA funding for the homes?
No, our NAHASDA entity is a little bit different. They're a little bit slower in their approach, more conservative. They're very low income oriented only. And the NAHASDA entity has been helpful to us because they had some lots that they allocated to us. And then they gave us 13 lots, and we went down there and built houses on them that were low income oriented. And all those are all been sold. But they have been reluctant to leverage up their NAHASDA funds. And so they haven't built many units. We have built 180 some units in the last 10 or 11 years here in town, and they've probably built a dozen, maybe, and so it's just a different approach. And we've been much more aggressive in just doing it ourselves. And Ho-chunking, by the way, is not in that low income housing business. This is a side gig for us. It's something I'm just sort of passionate about in building the town. We're a government contracting construction company, now soon to be casino company kind of thing. So it's just something we do, in order so I don't get fired, really.
Lance, do you mind telling us? Oh, sorry, Michelle. I was going to ask a quick
no,
question. Sorry.
No,
Do you mind telling us the plan of how long this has taken? Because I remember visiting back in Ho-chunk in 2010. And it was just that one street and the buildings and the senior housing and the light industrial. So
well, it's the Ho-chunk Village, the first 40 acres is essentially full. We have a few extra lots. That's taken about, I'd say about 13 years. You had to sort of dream it up. And now we're starting on the next 40 acres. And if I can give you some advice, guys, what we used to do is say, we get a grant, I want to build something. And the next question was, we got some money, where do we put it? And you say, well, let's put it over there. And if you go to a reservation town, you'll see this weird collection of nice buildings and old buildings and houses, and they're very disconnected and disjointed. And what we did is we designed the whole 40 acres at once to be a walkable, healthy community and there's entrepreneurial elements, there's cultural elements, there's housing. Since it's walkable, it's very much a health-oriented kind of community. And so whatever the grant was for, we'd say, oh, this is the entrepreneur side, or no, this is the housing side, this is the elder side, this is the cultural side. We got 17 grants in a row when we first designed it. In fact, we were on the cover of the ICDBG grant application, and I said we should apply for that, right? And because it was different, we thought bigger about it. And what's crazy is we get this grant, we still do the same thing. We get some money, we say, where should we put it? And I go, oh, here's where that goes. Here's where the low-income housing goes. Here's where the community building goes. Here's where the mortgage houses go. Here's where the elders houses go. So by planning it all up front, it allows us to build at our own pace using the current system that's sort of disjointed in funding. And rather than being an ad hoc approach that is just wherever you feel like putting it or whoever wants to push for it, you have a place. And if you were to come and look at it and you see that picture, I mean, it's really weird because it looks like it's been planned out perfectly. And really, it was just sort of a notion with these general areas that things would go. And now it looks great, you know? And so I would think big and spend the time and money to do the overall plan, and then use the normal system that funds these things. And then in the end, it looks like you knew what you were doing, right? And we were guessing. Right. So we've had to invent sort of a lot of these processes, and now we've got a lot of good people who know what they're doing. And so it's always like, let's build this. Where do we get the money? Everyone goes, let's try trick number 32, or let's do this. And so it's become a system that once we empowered ourselves and quit thinking in terms of, well, there's tribal housing here, there's the tribe here, there's Ho Chunk here. And the nonprofit has acted as our connector entity throughout the community. And we had some rich foundation who likes us, and they asked, what do we want next? And I said, give money to that community development fund, because our town is full of people with good ideas now. And so you don't have to tell us what the good idea is. Let us do it, and then just give us a funding mechanism to provide the matching dollars for it. So, I mean, that's just, we've become a system and a machine now. And we have the Down Payment Assistance Fund, the Community Development Fund, Ho Chunk Inc., the nonprofit. We have all these tools. IHS will fund elements of it. So it's just working, and it takes a while to get that sort of that multi-institution sort of cooperation going. First of all, you got to build the institutions, and then you've got to figure out how to get them to cooperate. So we're in graduate school, guys, if you're just doing this, and most people are working in their own bubbles. But I have a magic wand at Ho Chunk Inc. because we're big enough, and so we wave our magic wand around, and everyone cooperates together, and we do good things.
I have one last question. This is just for Tata. Tata, can you quickly give us an example of kind of how you're able to really leverage your for-profit corp and your for-profit and your nonprofit to make some of these happen, and maybe give us an example of something you've done in a tribal community?
Well, right now we're sort of doing something similar with Lance, where we're able to bring in grants through the nonprofit that we wouldn't normally be able to bring in through our for-profit company, and working with that on that model home. So we're leveraging the resources of our for-profit company to help assist and finance the nonprofit, but then bringing in grants through that entity. And vice versa. We've gotten into jobs through the nonprofit, and then because that work is very focused on something different, that has allowed our for-profit entity to come in the design aspect, because we are a licensed architecture firm. So Lance, if you need anyone to design that casino, we can do it. And Sunny, you as well, we can master plan as a Native woman-owned company, but leveraging those, then bringing it in together. So we've been doing exactly what Lance has been doing, is figuring out, how can we use this entity, the for-profit, to help assist the nonprofit, but the nonprofit is really the driver of things. Thank you.
We've got one of those too already, sorry. But we'll figure out some way to work together. I didn't mention our architecture firm.
You have everything, Lance.
Yeah, when we're very vertically integrated, because when we started, the state was always trying to boss us around, and they control tribes indirectly. And so we are fully integrated across the board. That way we control who gets hired. And if the state tries to mess with us, they have no one to call, because it's us on every stage of it. I mean, so, the hell with them. So I mean that in the friendliest way. I had lunch with the governor today, and he was mad at me, but he was very polite. Because they always want me to do what they say, and I want to do what's right for us. In the end, what's mad is they're always mad at me. And then about 2 or 3 years later, we get some sort of award, from them for entrepreneurial community development. Anyway, sorry for that speech.
Well, this has been a great webinar. It's been really nice to spend the last 90 minutes with you all. Casey's done a really good job, Fred Fisher, on this whole collaboration, and we've been working on this project now for over a year, and it's just been really a good experience. So I thank everybody who's participated today. I thank you, my presenters. Thank you very much for presenting today. I appreciate all of you. Jack, do you have any parting words? Also, we'll be sending out the presentation as well. I know we've gotten a lot of messages in the chat and private messages, so we'll make sure that gets out to you guys as well.
Those were my final words. Thank you to Lance and Tada and Sunny for wonderful presentations. And Michelle, thank you for pulling all of this together. And everybody just be aware that this is a series of webinars. So we will have additional webinars coming up later this year that we will keep you informed about. And we will make sure that we distribute all of the information that Michelle gets to us and that the presenters get to us to all the folks who have signed up for the presentation. So thank you. And thanks for staying over for a few extra minutes as well.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.